When the lottery official called to confirm I'd won $47 million, I wasn't thinking about new cars or dream homes. I was thinking about the family dinner I'd been uninvited from just 3 weeks earlier, when my sister Vanessa had smiled her perfect smile and said, "We'd rather not have your failure energy at Dad's birthday." Funny how money changes everything, especially for people who claimed you never mattered to them in the first place. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The termination letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, hidden among bills and junk mail, as if the universe was trying to soften the blow with deception. Despite your contributions, Meridian, healthcare is implementing organizational restructuring. Corporate speak for "you're fired." 6 years as a hospital administrator, gone in a paragraph of carefully crafted legalese. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. Rain tapped against the windows of my modest apartment, the one I'd been so proud to afford on my own after my divorce 3 years ago. The one with rent due in 11 days. My first instinct was to call my older sister Vanessa. Despite our complicated relationship, she'd always been the family fixer, the successful one with connections and solutions. But my finger hovered over her name in my contacts, remembering our last conversation 2 weeks ago. "Maybe if you'd gotten that MBA like I suggested instead of that useless public health degree, you wouldn't be stuck in middle management forever," she'd said casually, over brunch, while showing me photos of her family's recent Aspen ski trip. Her husband Bradley nodding along, their twin boys perfectly groomed in matching designer ski suits. I'd smiled and changed the subject, swallowing my defense that public health administration was meaningful work that helped people, that my middle management role coordinated care for thousands of vulnerable patients, that not everyone measured success by vacation destinations and square footage. Instead, I called my best friend, Maya. "They let me go," I said when she answered, my voice steadier than I expected. "Budget cuts." "Oh, Ellie, no." The genuine concern in her voice nearly broke my composure. "I'm coming over. Don't move." While waiting for Maya, I opened my laptop and began the humiliating process of calculating my financial runway. 3 months of savings if I cut everything to essentials. 2 interviews lined up next week for positions that paid significantly less than what I'd been making. Unemployment benefits that wouldn't cover rent. Maya arrived with comfort food and pragmatic support, helping me update my resume and draft. A list of contacts who might know of opportunities. By evening, I'd applied for 7 jobs, filed for unemployment, and created a spreadsheet of expenses I could cut. It wasn't a solution, but it was action, and action felt better than panic. "You've got this," Maya said as she left. "You're smart, experienced, and the healthcare industry is always hiring." "Just not at Meridian," I tried to joke. "Their loss," she said firmly. "Call me tomorrow after your appointment." The appointment? I'd almost forgotten. My annual check-in with Dr. Patterson scheduled months ago. I nearly canceled, calculating the copay in my head and wondering if it was a necessary expense now. But years of working in healthcare had taught me that preventive care wasn't where you cut corners even when finances got tight. The next morning, I dressed in the same professional clothes I'd worn to work countless times, now repurposed for job interviews and networking meetings. The hospital where Dr. Patterson practiced was across town from Meridian, for which I was grateful. The last thing I needed was running into former colleagues while unemployed. In the waiting room, I distracted myself by scrolling through job listings on my phone. 2 more possibilities. One in a neighboring city that would require relocation. One for a nonprofit with a mission I admired but a salary that made my stomach clench. "Eleanor Mitchell?" the nurse called, and I followed her through familiar medical office rituals. Weight, blood pressure, brief medical history update. "Any changes since your last visit?" she asked, looking up from her tablet. "Lost my job yesterday," I said, surprising myself with the admission. Not a medical change, but it feels relevant somehow. Her face softened with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. It's been a tough year for healthcare administration. My sister-in-law was let go from Central Memorial last month. Same story. Restructuring. This small connection, this moment of being seen and understood, steadied me. By the time Dr. Patterson entered, I'd compartmentalized my employment situation, focusing on health concerns, preventive screenings, lifestyle adjustments. Everything looks good, he said, reviewing my results. Though your blood pressure's a bit elevated today. Stress, I explained. I'm between jobs at the moment. He nodded without judgment. That'll do it. Make sure you're keeping up with your running. Physical activity is crucial for stress management. I promised I would. Thinking of how my morning runs had been the one constant through divorce, career changes, and now unemployment. Some days it felt like those solitary miles were the only time my life made complete sense. Leaving the medical building, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from my mother. My stomach tightened. News traveled fast in my family. Had she already heard about my job? I wasn't ready for the particular blend of concern and criticism that defined maternal support in the Mitchell family. I returned her call from the parking lot, bracing myself. Eleanor, finally, she answered on the second ring. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Sorry, Mom. I had a doctor's appointment. I kept my tone neutral, neither inviting questions nor suggesting anything was amiss. Is everything all right? The momentary concern in her voice almost made me confess. Just an annual checkup, I assured her. What's up? Your father's birthday dinner is next Friday, she said. We're doing it at Vanessa's new house, 7 o'clock, cocktail attire. Dad's birthday. I'd almost forgotten with everything happening. I'll be there, I said, mentally calculating if I could afford a gift on my new unemployed budget. Perhaps something handmade, meaningful rather than expensive. And Eleanor? My mother's voice took on the cautious tone she used when approaching difficult subjects. Vanessa mentioned you might be having some career changes. She said a colleague told her there were layoffs at Meridian. Of course, Vanessa's network of perfectly placed informants had already alerted her. And naturally, she'd told our mother before I could break the news myself. Yes, I confirmed, keeping my voice even. There was a restructuring. My position was eliminated yesterday. Oh, Eleanor. The disappointment in those 2 words contained multitudes, not just sympathy for my situation, but disappointment in me for allowing this to happen. As if job security were simply a matter of trying hard enough. Have you called Bradley? He knows the CEO at Metropolitan Health Systems. I'm sure he could put in a word. Bradley, Vanessa's investment banker husband who considered healthcare women's work, and had once asked me if administrators were basically secretaries with fancy titles. The thought of asking him for help made my skin crawl. I'm exploring several options, I said diplomatically. I've already got 2 interviews lined up next week. Well, that's something at least. My mother sighed. You know, your sister's division just got acquired for $30 million. They're giving her a whole team to manage in the restructuring. Amazing how different 2 careers can go, isn't it? And there it was. The inevitable comparison. As predictable as seasons changing. Amazing. I agreed flatly. Listen, Mom, I need to go. I've got another call coming in. A harmless lie to end a harmful conversation. Don't forget, Friday, at 7. And Eleanor? Maybe don't mention the job situation to everyone. No need to bring down the celebration with problems. I hung up and sat in my car, letting the familiar weight of family expectations settle on my shoulders. In the Mitchell family narrative, I was the cautionary tale, divorced at 32, childless at 35, and now unemployed. the counterpoint that made Vanessa's success shine brighter. For years, I'd tried to reject this framing, to build a life that valued different metrics of success: community impact, personal growth, meaningful work. But in moments like this, their measuring stick still left marks. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Any word on the Lincoln Heights position?" I was grateful for the interruption, for a friend who cared about my actual concerns rather than how they reflected on the family. "Nothing yet," I replied. "But I have a lead on something at Providence Hospital, infection control coordination." "Perfect for you," she responded immediately. "Your quality improvement protocols at Meridian were brilliant." This small affirmation, recognition of my actual professional value, steadied me. I started my car and headed home, planning to update my resume to highlight the infection control initiatives I'd led. One foot in front of the other, one application at a time, the way I'd always navigated setbacks. The next week passed in a blur of job applications, networking calls, and budget recalibrations. I sold some furniture I didn't need, canceled subscriptions, and picked up a weekend shift at a medical records consulting company. Not ideal, but it would extend my runway by a few weeks. By Thursday evening, I'd had 3 interviews, 2 rejections, and 1, "We'll keep your resume on file." Not the rapid employment I'd hoped for, but movement nonetheless. As I ironed my 1 cocktail dress for Dad's birthday dinner, my phone rang with Vanessa's custom ringtone, "Material Girl" by Madonna, a private joke with myself. "Ellie," she said when I answered, using my childhood nickname that only appeared when she wanted something. "About tomorrow night." "I'll be there," I promised. 7 o'clock, cocktail attire. I haven't forgotten." "That's the thing," Vanessa said, her voice taking on the artificially sympathetic tone I knew preceded something unpleasant. "Bradley and I were talking, and we think it might be uncomfortable for everyone if you come tomorrow." The iron hovered above my dress as I processed her words. "Uncomfortable how?" "Well, with your current situation, the job loss. You know how Dad gets about career stuff. It's so important to him. We don't want anything to distract from celebrating his achievement." "His achievement? It's his birthday?" "Vanessa, not an award ceremony." 65 is a milestone, she corrected, "and the party is also celebrating his retirement package. 30 years at the firm, full pension, the consulting contract they've offered him. It's a big deal." I set down the iron, switching it off so I wouldn't burn my only good dress while processing this conversation. "So you're uninviting me from Dad's birthday because I lost my job?" I clarified, wanting to be absolutely certain I understood the absurdity correctly. "Don't be dramatic, Ellie. We're just suggesting that maybe this particular gathering isn't the best timing. Everyone will be talking about success and achievements and retirement portfolios. It might make you feel bad about your circumstances." The thin veneer of concern couldn't disguise the actual message. My unemployment was an embarrassment they didn't want to explain to their country club friends who would be attending. "I see," I said, surprised by the calm in my voice. "And does Dad know you're uninviting his daughter from his birthday dinner?" A slight hesitation. "He agrees it's for the best. Mom, too. They're concerned about you, of course, but they think it might be easier for everyone this way." The casual cruelty of it hit me in waves. Not just the uninvitation, but the unified family front behind it. The collective decision that my economic setback made me unworthy of inclusion in a family milestone. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "I've been laid off, not diagnosed with a contagious disease. My unemployment isn't catching." "Don't be bitter," she snapped, the sympathetic pretense evaporating. "It's not a good look on you. This is exactly what we're trying to avoid, your negativity bringing everyone down. We'd rather not have your failure energy at Dad's birthday. You can see him another time, when things aren't so festive." Failure energy. as if my job loss were a character flaw rather than an economic reality faced by millions. Fine, I said, too stunned to argue further. Send him my love. We will, she assured me, voice brightening now that the unpleasant task was complete. And Ellie? Try LinkedIn Premium. Bradley says it's worth every penny for job seekers. After she hung up, I stood in my silent apartment, iron cooling on the board, cocktail dress half pressed. The magnitude of what had just happened slowly sank in. My family, the people who were supposed to offer unconditional support, had explicitly conditioned their love on my economic productivity. For a moment, I contemplated calling my mother, appealing to whatever maternal instinct might override this callousness. But I knew what would happen. The passive acknowledgement that yes, it was unfortunate, but Vanessa was probably right. After all, she was the successful one. She understood these things. Instead, I called Maya. They uninvited me from Dad's birthday, I said when she answered, the words sounding even more ridiculous spoken aloud. They what? Her outrage was immediate and validating. Please tell me you're joking. Apparently, my failure energy might contaminate the celebration of achievement. That's the most toxic thing I've ever heard, Maya declared. What are you going to do? I looked at the cocktail dress, at the small wrapped gift I'd prepared for my father. A first edition of a mystery novel he'd loved in his youth, found at a used bookstore for $12. More thoughtful than expensive, exactly what I'd thought would matter. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to show up anyway, create a scene worthy of a reality show. I would pay to see that, Maya said loyally. But the other part? I hesitated, articulating a thought that had been forming slowly over years of familial disappointment. The other part wonders why I keep seeking approval from people who have made it clear they only value a very specific version of success. Maya was quiet for a moment. That's the multi-thousand-dollar therapy question, isn't it? We talked. For another hour, her righteous anger gradually helping transform my hurt into something more productive, determination. Not to prove my family wrong, necessarily, but to reaffirm my own values. To remember that I hadn't chosen healthcare administration for the prestige or salary, but because I believed in creating systems that helped vulnerable people navigate complex medical challenges. After we hung up, I put away the cocktail dress and opened my laptop. If I wasn't going to spend Friday evening performing familial harmony at Vanessa's showcase home, I could use the time productively. There was a grant proposal for a community health initiative I'd been working on before the layoff, a passion project I'd started with colleagues who believed, as I did, that healthcare coordination could transform outcomes for underserved populations. Without the constraints of Meridian's corporate priorities, I could design the program as it should be, not as institutional politics demanded. I worked late into the night, energized by returning to work that aligned with my deepest values, rather than just advancing my career. The next morning, what would have been Dad's birthday celebration, I woke early for my usual run. 5 miles along the river path, mist rising from the water as dawn broke. With each step, each measured breath, I processed the reality of my family's rejection and what it revealed about their conditional love. By mile 3, I'd made a decision. I would give myself permission to step back from people who only valued me for external markers of success. Not cutting them off entirely, they were still family, but creating healthy distance to protect myself from their narrow metrics of worth. By mile 4, I was planning my day. After applying for 2 more positions, I would continue developing the community health grant proposal. Even if it never got funded, the process of creating it reconnected me with my professional purpose. By mile 5, I felt something unexpected, not just resignation or determination, but a strange sense of freedom. Without the constant pressure to meet my family's definition of success, I could reconnect with my own. Back at my apartment, showered and changed, I checked my email to find a response from Providence Hospital. They wanted a second interview for the infection control position. Progress. Not certainty, but movement in the right direction. As I prepared breakfast, my phone pinged with an email notification from an unfamiliar address. Maryland State Lottery Commission. Spam, almost certainly. I nearly deleted it without opening, but curiosity won out. The message was brief and official-looking, instructing me to contact their office regarding ticket 7726-0421. For a moment, I was confused. Then I remembered the lottery ticket Maya had insisted on buying when we stopped for coffee last week. For luck, she'd said. Career transition lottery karma. I'd laughed and tucked it into my wallet, forgotten until this moment. I called the number provided, expecting to learn I'd won $20, maybe $50, enough for a nice dinner or perhaps a week of premium job search services. Maryland State Lottery, this is Jennifer. How can I help you? The voice answered, crisply. Hi, I received an email about ticket number 7726-0421, I explained. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. Yes, Ms. Mitchell. Can you verify the last 4 digits of your Social Security number and your date of birth? I provided the information, increasingly curious. Thank you, Jennifer said. I'm pleased to inform you that you've won our progressive jackpot drawing. The current jackpot stands at $47 million. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? $47 million, she said again, her tone suggesting this was a routine conversation for her. Congratulations. We'll need you to come to our main office to verify your ticket and complete the paperwork. Would Monday morning work for you? Somehow I managed to agree to the appointment, ask relevant questions about documentation needed, and end the call without screaming, fainting, or otherwise alarming the Lottery Commission representative. Then I sat on my kitchen floor, back against the refrigerator, trying to comprehend what had just happened. $47 million. The exact amount was meaningless, merely life-changing in the most literal sense. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Dad had a wonderful birthday celebration. Everyone asked about you. We said you were unwell. Feel better soon. Attached was a photo of the family gathered around my father, champagne glasses raised, Vanessa front and center in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I stared at the message, then at my lottery confirmation email, then back at the message. The cosmic timing seemed too perfect to be coincidental, too dramatically ironic to be real life. Last night, I hadn't been good enough to attend a family dinner. This morning, I was a multimillionaire. I thought about how easily this changed everything, how quickly the family that had excluded me for my failure energy would welcome me back once news of my windfall spread. How Vanessa's attitude would transform from condescension to sudden sisterly affection. How my parents would forget they'd ever agreed to uninvite me from anything. I could already hear their justifications. We were just trying to protect you from feeling bad about your situation. We knew you were going through a tough time and didn't want to pressure you. Family always comes first. We've always said that. The thought made me both laugh and feel slightly ill. The transparency of conditional acceptance wasn't new. I'd experienced it through my divorce, through career setbacks, through choices that didn't align with the Mitchell family blueprint for success. But the lottery win illuminated it with such clarity that it was almost a gift in itself. I texted Maya, "Need to see you. Emergency. Good emergency." Then I set my phone aside and made a cup of tea, giving myself space to think. $47 million wouldn't just change my financial situation. It would change every relationship in my life, especially with the family who had just demonstrated exactly how they valued me when they thought I had nothing to offer. The question wasn't whether my family would try to re-enter my life. They undoubtedly would once news broke. The question was how I would respond when they did. what boundaries I would establish, what values I would prioritize. As the reality of my new situation began to sink in, I felt a strange calm replace the initial shock. This wasn't just about money. It was about the opportunity to redefine success entirely on my own terms. To build a life aligned with my actual values, not the performances of success my family had always demanded. I didn't need to prove anything to people who had made their conditional acceptance so explicit. Instead, I could focus on what truly mattered, creating positive impact, supporting genuine connections, building something meaningful. The tea grew cold as possibilities expanded in my mind. The Community Health Initiative could become reality without waiting for institutional approval. Healthcare coordination for vulnerable populations, scholarships for public health students, investments in preventive care programs. My phone buzzed. Again, Maya calling back. I answered, still sitting on my kitchen floor, still processing the surreal turn my life had taken in the span of a morning. "What's the emergency?" she demanded. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, looking at the family photo Vanessa had sent. All smiles and celebration, their success on proud display. Then, I looked at the lottery commission email confirming my appointment to claim $47 million. "Remember that lottery ticket you bought me last week?" I began, my voice steadier than I would have expected. We need to talk about karma and cosmic timing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya arrived at my apartment 45 minutes after our call, clutching a bottle of champagne and wearing an expression of controlled skepticism. "Okay," she said, setting the bottle on my kitchen counter. "Run this by me again, slowly." I handed her the lottery confirmation email and my ticket. I checked the numbers 3 times. "It's real, Maya. $47 million. She examined the ticket, compared it to the email, then looked up at me with widening eyes. "Holy Ellie, this is actually happening." "I know." I slumped onto a kitchen stool. "I'm still processing." Maya uncorked the champagne with expert efficiency and poured it into 2 coffee mugs, the only clean drinking vessels in my apartment. "To cosmic justice," she toasted, handing me one. "To unexpected turns," I countered, clinking my mug against hers. We sat in my small living room, the morning sun creating patterns on the wall through blinds I'd been meaning to replace. The apartment suddenly looked different to me. Not just modest, but temporary. A stage I was passing through rather than the backdrop to my diminished future. "So what now?" Maya asked, setting down her mug. "Besides obviously claiming your winnings on Monday." "I've been thinking about that." I pulled my laptop closer. "I made some notes while waiting for you." "Of course you did," Maya smiled. Logical planning in the face of complete life upheaval. Classic Eleanor Mitchell. I'd broken my thoughts into categories: immediate practicalities, financial strategy, personal goals, and, the section I was most focused on, impact opportunities. "I want to establish a healthcare coordination initiative for underserved communities," I explained, pointing to the detailed outline I'd already started. The same model I was developing at Meridian, but without corporate constraints. Patient-centered care navigation across fragmented systems. Maya studied my notes, then looked at me with a mix of admiration and concern. "You've been unemployed for 10 days and just won life-changing money. Most people would be booking flights to Tahiti, not drafting program models for community health." "I can do both," I pointed out. "That's the thing about $47 million. It creates options." "Speaking of options," Maya hesitated. "What about your family? When are you going to tell them?" The question I'd been circling since the lottery confirmation. "I'm not sure I am, at least not right away." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" They uninvited me from my own father's birthday because I lost my job, because my failure energy might contaminate their celebration. I could hear the hurt crystallizing into something harder in my voice. What happens when they discover I'm suddenly worth millions? When my energy is valuable to them again? They come crawling back, Maya said matter-of-factly. Vanessa leads the charge with selective amnesia about ever excluding you. Exactly. I took another sip of champagne, and I'm not ready for that conversation yet. I need time to figure out what I want my life to look like without their judgment clouding my decisions. Maya considered this. So what? You just don't tell them? For how long? News like this has a way of getting out, Ellie. She was right. Lottery winners could request anonymity in Maryland, but eventually the lifestyle changes would become obvious. Property purchases, career shifts, charitable giving, these things left paper trails. I'm not saying forever, I clarified. Just long enough to establish some boundaries, to decide how I want to structure my relationships going forward. Fair enough. Maya refilled our mugs. Though I'd pay good money to see Vanessa's face when she finds out. We spent the afternoon outlining practicalities, lawyers I should consult, financial advisors to interview, security considerations most lottery winners never think about until it's too late. Maya's professional background in risk management proved unexpectedly valuable for navigating sudden wealth. By evening, we had a solid plan for the coming week. Claim the winnings with minimal publicity, assemble a professional team for wealth management, begin research for the healthcare initiative, and maintain regular life patterns to avoid tipping off family or colleagues about my changed circumstances. One more thing, Maya said as she was leaving. The Providence Hospital interview. Are you still going? I hadn't considered that my lottery win might change my professional plans. Yes, I decided. Regardless of the money, I want meaningful work. The financial freedom just means I can be more selective about positions and negotiate from strength. Maya hugged me tightly before departing. I'm so happy for you, Ellie. Not just for the money, but for the chance to prove them all wrong by succeeding completely on your own terms. Alone again, I wandered my apartment, seeing it with new eyes. The furniture I'd carefully selected after my divorce. Pieces that represented financial independence rather than luxury. The framed degrees on my wall, educational achievements. My family had consistently undervalued compared to Vanessa's more lucrative career path. The running medals from half marathons I'd completed. Personal milestones celebrated only by friends, never by relatives who saw athletic pursuits as time that could be better spent on professional advancement. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Hope you're feeling better, Eleanor. Your father missed you at his birthday. Vanessa's new home was beautiful. Maybe you can see it another time. The calculated casualness of it stung. No acknowledgement of the uninvitation, just the continuation of our family's tradition of rewriting uncomfortable realities into more palatable narratives. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and continued refining plans for the community. Health initiative. If the Mitchell family valued financial success above all else, I would show them what real impact looked like. Not through luxury homes and country club memberships, but through transformed systems and improved lives. The weekend passed in a blur of research and planning. I maintained my normal routines, morning runs, grocery shopping, laundry, while internally processing the seismic shift in my circumstances. By Sunday evening, I felt calmer, more centered in the strange new reality of being secretly wealthy while outwardly unchanged. Monday morning, I dressed carefully for my lottery commission appointment. Professional but understated, nothing that would photograph dramatically if news cameras were present. The last thing I needed was Vanessa or my parents seeing me on Nye. The evening news before I'd figured out how to handle them. The lottery office was surprisingly mundane, a government building with fluorescent lighting and dated furniture. Jennifer, the representative I'd spoken with, guided me through verification procedures and paperwork with efficient friendliness. "We respect winner privacy," she assured me, sensing my nervousness. "Your name will be in public records as required. By law, but we don't do press conferences unless winners request them." "Definitely no press conference," I confirmed. "You'd be surprised how many winners want them," she said, sliding another form across the desk. "The spotlight can be tempting, even for people who later regret the attention." I thought of Vanessa, who would absolutely hold a press conference, probably with professionally designed graphics and catered refreshments. The contrast between us had never felt clearer. After 2 hours of signatures and verifications, it was done. I was officially a multi-millionaire, with funds to be transferred within 3 business days. I left the lottery office feeling strangely unchanged yet fundamentally different, like a quantum particle existing in 2 states simultaneously. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Providence Hospital, confirming tomorrow's second interview. I texted back my acceptance, still committed to pursuing meaningful work regardless of financial need. The money might change my circumstances, but I wouldn't let it change my purpose. At home, I made my first concrete decision as a wealthy person, hiring the law firm Maya had recommended to establish proper asset protection. The initial consultation was scheduled for Wednesday, after the funds would be available. Until then, I would continue living exactly as before, giving myself time to adjust to the new reality before making visible changes. Tuesday's interview at Providence went surprisingly well. The infection control coordinator position aligned perfectly with my experience and values, focusing on systems that protected vulnerable patients. The salary they mentioned, 15% less than my previous position, no longer mattered, but the impact potential did. "When would you be available to start?" the HR director asked as the interview concluded. 2 weeks, I replied, giving myself enough time to set up proper financial structures before beginning a new chapter professionally. She smiled. "We'll be in touch very soon, Ms. Mitchell. Your experience at Meridian is exactly what we're looking for." I left the hospital feeling validated in a way that had nothing to do with my lottery win. My professional value remained intact despite Meridian's restructuring, despite my family's dismissal of my career choices. And now, with financial freedom, I could pursue the most meaningful aspects of healthcare administration without concern for climbing corporate ladders or impressing family members. Wednesday morning, the bank called to confirm the transfer was complete. $47 million, minus tax withholdings, now resided in my previously modest checking account. A surreal juxtaposition of ordinary and extraordinary that made me laugh out loud when I checked the balance online. The meeting with the law firm, Patterson, Chen & Associates, was comprehensive and reassuring. Eliza Patterson, the founding partner, had extensive experience with sudden wealth clients and understood both the financial and personal implications. "The first priority is protecting your assets," she explained. "But equally important is protecting your personal boundaries. Wealth changes how people see you and treat you, sometimes in ways that are difficult to navigate, especially with family." I explained my situation, the strained family dynamics, the recent exclusion, my desire to establish boundaries before revealing my changed circumstances. Eliza nodded understanding. "That's actually wise. Most new wealth clients make the mistake of announcing their fortune before they've had time to process it themselves. It puts them at a disadvantage in every relationship renegotiation that follows." We established a series of trusts, an LLC for the healthcare initiative I was developing, and a comprehensive estate plan that reflected my values. By Friday, the basic structure would be in place, enough to begin my new financial life with proper protections. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a call from Providence Hospital. They were offering me the infection control position, with a start date the following Monday if possible. I accepted immediately, feeling the pieces of my new life beginning to align. 2 more calls followed in quick succession. First Maya, checking on my progress with the legal team, then unexpectedly, Vanessa. I hesitated before answering my sister's call, steeling myself for whatever new criticism or condescension awaited. "Ellie," she began, using the familial nickname that always preceded manipulation. "I've been thinking about you. How's the job search going?" "Fine," I replied neutrally. "How are you?" "Wonderful, actually. Bradley just closed another major deal, and the boys got accepted to that exclusive summer program at the lake." "You? Know the one with the sailing instructors from Yale?" "Sounds nice." I kept my responses minimal, waiting for her to reach the actual purpose of her call. "Listen," she continued, "I wanted to check if you're free for dinner next week. Mom and Dad will be in town, and we thought it might be nice to have a family gathering." The invitation, just days after I'd been explicitly uninvited from our father's birthday, landed like a stone in still water. "Really?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. What happened to my failure energy contaminating family gatherings? "Oh, Ellie." Vanessa's laugh tinkled through the phone, practiced and dismissive. "You're so sensitive sometimes. That was about Dad's retirement celebration specifically, with all his colleagues there. This is just family dinner." The revision of recent history was breathtaking in its audacity. "So I'm acceptable for family-only gatherings, just not celebrations where your important connections might see me." "That's not what I meant." Her voice took on the impatient tone she used when others failed to accept her version of reality. "I'm extending an olive branch here. Bradley thinks it would be good for you to network with some of his colleagues. He knows someone at Providence Hospital who might have positions available." So that was it. She'd somehow learned about my Providence interview, likely through the same network that had informed her about the Meridian layoffs, and now wanted to position herself as the helpful, connected sister who could take credit for my employment, if it materialized. "Actually," I said, surprised by my own calmness, "I've already accepted a position at Providence. Infection control coordination. I start Monday." "Oh." The single syllable contained multitudes: surprise, disappointment, at being deprived of the savior role, quick calculation of how to reframe the narrative. "Well, that's good. Entry-level positions can sometimes lead to better opportunities." "It's a senior coordinator position," I corrected, "directly reporting to the chief medical officer." "Right, of course." Vanessa rallied quickly. "Well, dinner would still be nice. To celebrate your new job. Tuesday at 7? Our place?" I considered my options. Declining would maintain the distance I'd been contemplating since the lottery win. Accepting would mean facing my family's dynamics from my new psychological position of strength, financially secure but with that security still unknown to them. Tuesday works, I decided. It would be a test run, an opportunity to practice establishing boundaries without the complication of my wealth being a factor. Perfect. Business casual, nothing fancy. After hanging up, I sat in my car, contemplating the layers of irony in the situation. Vanessa was inviting me back into the family circle because I'd secured employment that met their minimum standards for acceptability. She had no idea that in the days since being excluded from our father's birthday, I'd become financially independent beyond anything even Bradley had achieved. The thought made me smile, not from vindictiveness, but from the strange clarity it brought to the conditional nature of my family's acceptance. I was the same person I'd been last week, same values, same skills, same fundamental character. Only my economic status had changed, yet it would transform how they saw and treated me. The question was, would I let it transform how I saw and treated myself? Back at my apartment, I began making concrete plans for the next phase of my life. I would work at Providence, focusing on infection control systems that protected vulnerable patients. Simultaneously, I would develop my community health initiative through the LLC, working with healthcare experts from my professional network. For housing, I decided against both extremes, neither remaining in my current modest apartment nor purchasing a mansion to rival Vanessa's. Instead, I would find a comfortable home in a neighborhood I loved, with space for a home office and guest room, practical luxury rather than ostentatious display. Most importantly, I would maintain my core values and relationships. Maya would remain my closest confidant. My running routine would continue, perhaps enhanced by coaching or trail experiences I couldn't previously afford. My work would still focus on healthcare systems that helped those most in need of navigation assistance. By Sunday evening, with my first day at Providence approaching, I'd established the basic framework for my new life. The trusts were created, the LLC formed, a financial management team selected. I'd viewed 3 potential homes, finding one, a renovated craftsman with a garden and office space. That felt right. My real estate agent was preparing an offer. Externally, nothing had changed. I still lived in my apartment, drove my 5-year-old Honda, and wore the same professional clothes I'd worn at Meridian. But internally, everything was different. Not just because of financial security, but because of the clear lens the lottery win had provided into my family's conditional acceptance. Monday morning, I dressed for my first day at Providence with a sense of purpose and clarity I hadn't felt in years. The infection control position represented meaningful work I'd chosen freely, without financial pressure or family expectations clouding my judgment. As I gathered my keys and bag, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Good luck today. Remember, first impressions matter. Wear the blue suit Mom got you for Christmas. It's the most professional thing you own. The presumptiveness of the advice, both that I needed her guidance on professional attire and that my wardrobe was somehow inferior, would have irritated me a week ago. Now it simply informed my understanding of our dynamic. My sister viewed me as less capable, less successful, less worthy of respect than herself. My new wealth wouldn't change that fundamental perception, just how she expressed it. I didn't reply to her text. Instead, I drove to Providence Hospital with quiet confidence, ready to begin this new chapter on my own terms. The blue suit remained in my closet, replaced by a charcoal pencil skirt and burgundy blazer I'd chosen myself. The day passed in orientation activities and introductory meetings. My new colleagues were competent and welcoming, the infection control challenges complex and engaging. By afternoon, I was already identifying systems that could be improved, patient populations who could benefit from better coordination. Driving home, I realized I hadn't thought about my lottery win for hours. The work itself had been absorbing enough to push my changed financial circumstances to the background. Exactly as I'd hoped, money might provide security and opportunities, but purpose would come from the impact I created. I stopped at a realtor's office to sign the offer on the Craftsman house, making a cash bid slightly above asking price to ensure acceptance. The realtor's eyebrows raised slightly at the cash offer, but she didn't comment beyond confirming the details. The pieces were falling into place. Home, career, purpose, financial security. Each element aligned with my values rather than my family's expectations. Each decision made from a position of choice rather than necessity. Tuesday arrived, bringing with it my second day at Providence and, that evening, dinner with my family at Vanessa's home. The dinner I'd been excluded from a week earlier because of my failure energy, now replaced with conditional acceptance because I'd secured employment that met their minimum standards. I left work at 5, allowing time to return to my apartment and change for the family dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me that tonight would be the last time I'd face my family's judgment from a position of perceived economic inferiority. By our next gathering, my circumstances would be dramatically transformed, either through their discovery of my lottery win or through the visible changes in my lifestyle that would inevitably follow. As I changed into a simple black dress, Elegant but intentionally understated compared to Vanessa's usual cocktail attire, I contemplated how to approach the evening. Not with righteousness or vindictiveness, but with clear boundaries and self-respect. My worth had never been determined by my economic status, neither when unemployed nor now as a multimillionaire. Tonight would be a test run for the person I was becoming, financially secure but defined by values rather than wealth, confident but not arrogant, successful on my own terms rather than my family's. I drove to Vanessa's suburban showcase home, parking my modest Honda between Bradley's Tesla and my father's Mercedes. The contrast would soon disappear, not because I planned to match their automotive display, but because authentic choices would replace the constraints of limited resources. As I approached the front door, I took a deep breath, centering myself in the knowledge that everything had changed, yet nothing fundamental about me needed to change. I had always been worthy of respect and inclusion. The lottery win merely illuminated that truth. It didn't create it. I rang the doorbell, ready to face my family from this new perspective of inner security. The evening ahead would be challenging, perhaps even uncomfortable, but it would set the stage for the relationships I wanted to build going forward. Relationships based on mutual respect rather than economic valuation. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms, with my own values intact. The greatest win wasn't the lottery. It was the clarity about what truly mattered in my life and relationships. That clarity was worth more than $47 million. It was priceless. The door swung open to reveal Vanessa, picture perfect in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first month's salary at Providence. Her smile froze momentarily. As she assessed my simple black dress, a micro-expression of judgment flashing across her features before the hostess mask slipped back into place. "Ellie, right on time." She air-kissed both my cheeks, a habit she'd adopted after Bradley's first international business trip. "Everyone's in the living room. Mom and Dad just arrived." I followed her through the foyer, taking in the calculated opulence of her home. Everything designed to impress, from the oversized crystal chandelier to the original artwork displayed with strategic lighting. The house wasn't just a home, it was a statement piece, a physical manifestation of Vanessa's definition of success. The living room continued the theme, custom furniture arranged for maximum impact rather than comfort, design magazines artfully scattered on the coffee table, family photos in silver frames displaying Vanessa, Bradley, and the twins in coordinated outfits against picturesque backgrounds. My parents were seated on the pristine white sofa, looking like they'd been posed for a family wealth management brochure. Mom in her St. John knit suit, Dad in business casual that still managed to broadcast affluence. Bradley stood at the built-in bar, preparing drinks with performative precision. "Eleanor," my father greeted me with the formal version of my name he always used in social situations. "Congratulations on the new position. Providence is a respectable institution." The faint praise carried its usual undercurrent, respectable, but not prestigious. Acceptable, but not impressive. Good enough for his disappointing daughter, but nothing like Vanessa's accomplishments. "Thank you," I replied simply. "I'm excited about the infection control program. It will impact vulnerable patient populations across their system." My mother smiled tightly. "That's nice, dear. Vanessa was just telling us about Bradley's new partnership track. Top 5 in his cohort, and the youngest by almost a decade." And there it was, the immediate pivot to Vanessa's orbit, the reflexive comparison that had defined our family dynamic since childhood. Once, it would have stung. Tonight, I observed it with new clarity, recognizing the pattern without being wounded by it. "Congratulations, Bradley," I said with genuine politeness. "That's impressive." Bradley nodded from the bar. "Lots of hours, but worth it. Scotch, Eleanor? Or are you still doing that white wine spritzer thing?" The subtle dig, positioning my preference as unsophisticated compared to his expensive single malt, was so predictable I almost smiled. Sparkling water, actually. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Always the responsible one, Vanessa commented with a laugh that suggested responsibility was somehow less admirable than her brand of success. Bradley, pour me another of those wonderful martinis. The evening proceeded along familiar lines. My parents inquired briefly about my new position before Vanessa redirected the conversation to her children's achievements, Bradley's recent deals, and their upcoming vacation to a private island you probably haven't heard of. It's very exclusive. I participated minimally, offering appropriate responses when directly addressed, but otherwise observing the family dynamic with newfound detachment. Their approval had always been conditional, their validation reserved for achievements that matched their narrow definition of success. Financial status, social connections, prestigious affiliations, these were the currencies they valued, not impact, purpose, or authentic relationships. So, Eleanor, my father said as we moved to the dining room, where Vanessa's housekeeper had laid out an elaborate meal. Providence Hospital. Is there a path to advancement there, or is this position a holding pattern? The question's subtext was clear. Was this job merely a stopgap until I found something more impressive, or had I resigned myself to mediocrity? The position aligns with my values and expertise, I replied, taking my assigned seat at the table. Healthcare systems that protect vulnerable patients have always been my professional focus. My mother frowned slightly. Yes, but what about growth potential? Vanessa was telling us about her new team. 15 direct reports and a discretionary budget in the millions. Once again, I was being measured against Vanessa's yardstick, found wanting because my priorities differed from hers. Because I valued impact over status, service over dominance. The healthcare landscape is changing, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Coordination roles are increasingly central to improving outcomes and reducing costs. There's significant growth, potential in developing systems that bridge fragmented care. Bradley cut in before I could continue. Speaking of growth potential, have you seen the latest on Meridian's stock? Down 12% since the restructuring. They're hemorrhaging talent since those layoffs. No offense, Eleanor, but you might have dodged a bullet there. No offense taken, I replied, though the casual reference to my job loss, the very reason I'd been excluded from Dad's birthday celebration, highlighted the family's selective memory. Vanessa nodded enthusiastically. Exactly what I told. Ellie, sometimes these setbacks are actually setups for something better. She patted my hand in a gesture of performative support. And see, now you've got this perfectly adequate position at Providence. Perfectly adequate. The condescension was breathtaking. How are you managing financially with the transition? My father asked, his tone suggesting he was preparing to offer assistance that would come with strings of obligation and judgment. Before I could answer, Vanessa jumped in. Dad, I already told Bradley we might need to help her with a bridge loan if the Providence salary isn't sufficient. Their pay scales are notoriously behind market. The presumption that I needed their financial assistance, that they'd discussed my personal finances without my involvement, that my sister and brother-in-law were positioning themselves as potential benefactors, would have infuriated me a week ago. Now, with $47 million in carefully structured trusts, it was almost amusing. That's thoughtful, I said diplomatically, but unnecessary. I've managed my finances carefully. My mother exchanged a significant look with Vanessa, the kind that communicated volumes of doubt without words. Well, if you need help with the rent or anything, just say the word. Family supports family. Except when that family member has failure energy that might contaminate a celebration, I thought but didn't say. Speaking of family support, Vanessa segued smoothly, we've been discussing the summer house situation. Mom and Dad are considering transferring ownership to us, since we use it the most with the boys. The summer house, a modest but well-situated cottage on the Chesapeake that our grandparents had purchased decades ago. I'd spent childhood summers there while our parents worked, reading books on the small dock and swimming in the bay. In recent years, Vanessa had gradually taken over the property, redecorating in her preferred style and scheduling her family's visits to monopolize the prime weeks. "We'd make sure you could visit sometimes, Ellie," Vanessa added magnanimously. "Maybe during the off-season when the boys are in school. It's lovely in October." The casual disinheritance, redistributing family property based on their perception of who deserved it more, crystallized everything about our family dynamic. My sister wasn't just the favorite, she was the inheritor of everything our parents valued, both materially and symbolically. "I always loved that dock," I said, surprising myself with the calm in my voice. "Watching the ospreys dive for fish, reading until the light faded, some of my happiest memories." My mother looked momentarily uncomfortable, perhaps remembering that the property had emotional significance for both daughters, not just the favored one. "Well, nothing's decided yet, just preliminary discussions." "Of course," I acknowledged, letting the topic drop. With my changed circumstances, I could buy a waterfront property of my own if I wished. The summer house's significance wasn't its market value, but what its redistribution revealed about my place in the family hierarchy. Dinner continued with Vanessa dominating the conversation, recounting her latest professional triumphs and her children's accomplishments. Bradley periodically interjected with financial acronyms and investment references designed to impress. My parents beamed at them both, offering effusive praise for each achievement mentioned. I observed it all with a strange sense of distance, as if watching actors perform a familiar play. The script hadn't changed. Vanessa as the golden child, me as the disappointing daughter, our parents as the approving audience for one and the critical evaluators of the other. But my role in the production had shifted. I was no longer a participant seeking validation. I was an observer noticing patterns. "Eleanor seems quiet tonight," my mother commented as Vanessa's housekeeper served dessert. "Are you feeling all right, dear? You're not still upset about missing your father's birthday, are you?" The reframing was masterful, transforming my explicit exclusion into a voluntary absence that I might now be upset about, as if my hurt were an overreaction rather than a reasonable response to being uninvited. "I'm fine," I replied. "Just listening." "Good," Vanessa interjected brightly, "because we've been thinking about the family Christmas plans. Bradley's firm is having their holiday gala at the Peninsula this year. Very exclusive, strictly partners and their families. We managed to get Mom and Dad included as our guests." The implication hung unspoken but clear. I would not be included in this prestigious event. Once again, my presence was conditional, acceptable for a family dinner in Vanessa's home, but not for a high-profile social gathering where status mattered. "Sounds lovely," I said, my tone neutral. "I've been considering a service trip for the holidays, actually. A healthcare coordination project in underserved communities." My mother frowned. "At Christmas? But it's a family time." The contradiction was striking. I was family when it suited them, when my exclusion might reflect poorly on them, but not when my inclusion might complicate their social positioning. "I think it sounds meaningful," I replied. "Using my skills where they're most needed." Bradley cleared his throat. "Speaking of using skills effectively, Eleanor, I've been meaning to talk to you about your financial planning. As someone who handles wealth management professionally, I'm concerned about your retirement strategy, especially after this employment gap." Another presumption, that I needed his financial guidance, that my employment gap of less than 2 weeks had somehow compromised my future security. Little did he know I'd spent the afternoon with a team of financial advisors mapping out trust structures and philanthropic foundations. "I appreciate the concern," I said. but I've recently reviewed my financial planning. I'm comfortable with my strategy. Bradley exchanged a skeptical glance with Vanessa. Well, if you'd like a professional opinion at some point, let me know. The earlier you address these gaps, the better. I'll keep that in mind, I replied, suppressing a smile at the irony. As the evening drew to a close, Vanessa led a tour of recent renovations to their home. A new media room with theater seating, a wine cellar Bradley had designed with an imported Italian cooling system, the twins' playroom with custom built-ins, and an elaborate train set that educational consultants recommend for spatial reasoning development. Each space was presented as evidence of their success, their discernment, their rightful place at the top of the family hierarchy. I followed along with polite interest, seeing not just the material display but the insecurity beneath it, the constant need for validation, for confirmation that they were exceptional. "And this is my new home office," Vanessa announced, showing a magazine-worthy space with custom cabinetry and an antique desk positioned to take advantage of garden views. "I've been offered a senior vice presidency, which would mean more remote work flexibility. The announcement goes out next week." "Congratulations," I said, genuinely impressed with her professional achievement, if not her need to showcase it. "That's a significant step." "It really is," she agreed, satisfaction evident in her tone. "Especially since I'm the youngest female SVP in company history." She paused, perhaps waiting for more effusive praise, then added with practiced casualness, "We're looking at private schools in Switzerland for the boys. With my new position and Bradley's partnership, we want to give them a truly global perspective." The comparison hung unspoken in the air, her children being groomed for international success while I focused on local healthcare systems. Her priorities defined as aspirational, while mine were implicitly positioned as limited. "They're fortunate to have these opportunities," I acknowledged, refusing to engage in the implied competition. As the tour concluded and we returned to the foyer, my parents prepared to leave, my father checking his watch with the subtle impatience he always displayed at family gatherings. "This was nice," my mother said, embracing Vanessa warmly and me more perfunctorily. "We should do it again soon, maybe once Eleanor is settled in her new position." Again, the conditional inclusion, dependent on my employment status, on meeting their minimum standards for acceptability. "Actually," I said as I gathered my purse, "I'm looking at houses this weekend. If I find something suitable, perhaps I could host next time." Vanessa blinked in surprise. "Houses? I thought you were renting that apartment downtown." "I'm considering a change," I replied simply. "A garden would be nice." "Houses in this market?" Bradley scoffed. "With Providence's compensation structure? You might want to look at condominiums instead. Much more realistic for your situation." There it was again, the assumption of financial limitation, the positioning of my choices as necessarily constrained compared to theirs. The reminder of my place in the hierarchy they'd constructed. "I've found some options within my parameters," I said, deliberately vague. "Well, don't overextend yourself," my father advised with the automatic caution he always directed at my financial decisions. Property ownership comes with many hidden costs that first-time buyers often underestimate. I nodded, accepting the keys to my Honda from the valet Vanessa had insisted on hiring for the evening. An unnecessary expense for 5 cars in a circular driveway, but another signal of their prosperity. "Thank you for dinner," I said to Vanessa and Bradley. "It was illuminating." "Illuminating?" Vanessa repeated, her practiced smile faltering slightly. "Clarifying," I amended. "About what matters to me going forward." She recovered quickly. "Well, we're just glad you're back on your feet with this Providence position. Everyone goes through setbacks, Ellie. The important thing is not to let them define you." The condescension was breathtaking, positioning my layoff as a personal failing rather than a corporate decision, suggesting I needed her guidance to process it, framing my new position as mere recovery rather than a purposeful choice. I couldn't agree more, I replied with a genuine smile. We're defined by our values and choices, not our circumstances. The statement held deeper meaning than she could possibly understand, not just about employment, but about the wealth that had transformed my financial reality while leaving my core values intact. Driving home from Vanessa's showcase house to my modest apartment, I felt a surprising sense of lightness. The evening had confirmed everything I'd been processing since the lottery win. My family's love and inclusion were conditional, based on economic metrics and status markers rather than inherent worth or authentic connection. The revelation wasn't new, but my response to it had transformed. Where once I'd felt hurt and inadequate, struggling to earn approval that was always just out of reach, now I felt clear-eyed and liberated. Their judgment had lost its power over me, not because I'd suddenly acquired wealth that would impress them, but because I'd recognized the fundamental emptiness of seeking validation from people who measured worth in such limited terms. At home, I made myself a cup of tea and checked my emails. The real estate agent had called. My offer on the Craftsman house had been accepted. The seller appreciated the clean cash offer and flexible closing timeline. I could take possession at the end of the month if the paperwork processed smoothly. My first major purchase as a wealthy person was not a status symbol or luxury item, but a home that reflected my authentic preferences. Beautiful but not ostentatious, well-crafted rather than extravagant, practical and warm rather than designed to impress. I thought about how differently the evening at Vanessa's would have unfolded if my family had known about my lottery win. The dynamic would have shifted instantly. Not because I had become more worthy of respect or inclusion, but because my economic status would have suddenly met their criteria for value. My father would have been interested in my financial planning rather than skeptical of my capacity. My mother would have proudly mentioned my new circumstances to her friends rather than minimizing my achievements. Vanessa and Bradley would have positioned themselves as allies rather than benefactors, perhaps even seeking investment in their ventures or connections to my newly valuable network. The conditional nature of their acceptance would have been revealed, not through exclusion, but through sudden, transparent inclusion, just as conditional, just as empty of genuine appreciation for who I was as a person. I finished my tea and prepared for bed, mentally reviewing my plans for the coming weeks. Tomorrow, I would continue building the infection control program at Providence, leveraging my expertise to protect vulnerable patients. This weekend, I would meet with architects about adapting the Craftsman house to my needs, not excessive renovations but thoughtful improvements to create spaces for both work and relaxation. Next week, I would formalize the structure for my healthcare coordination initiative, beginning with research into communities most affected by fragmented care systems. The project that had once been a side passion, constrained by corporate priorities and limited resources, could now become a fully realized program with significant impact potential. Through it all, I would maintain my core identity and values, not defined by either the limitations of my previous financial situation or the excesses made possible by the lottery win. The money had changed my circumstances, not my character. Had expanded my options, not altered my priorities. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized the true value of the lottery win wasn't the financial security it provided, but the clarity it offered. Like a contrast dye in a medical scan, the sudden wealth had illuminated patterns that had always existed, but were sometimes difficult to see clearly. In my family relationships, in social dynamics, in systems of valuation. The question now wasn't whether I would tell my family about my changed circumstances, but when and how I would establish the boundaries necessary for healthier relationships going forward. Not relationships based on financial equivalence or competitive success metrics, but on mutual respect and authentic connection. Perhaps that was the real win. Not $47 million, but the opportunity to redefine success entirely on my own terms. To build a life aligned with my deepest values, rather than external expectations. to create impact that reflected my vision of a better healthcare system, a more equitable world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to align my actions with my values. But tonight, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, secure in the knowledge that my worth had never been determined by my bank account, neither when it contained 3 digits, nor now that it held 8. I was, and always had been, more than enough exactly as I was. My second week at Providence Hospital passed in a productive blur. The infection control role challenged me in exactly the ways I'd hoped. Complex systems to optimize, interdepartmental, relationships to navigate, vulnerable patient populations to protect. I arrived early each morning and often stayed late, not from financial necessity, but from genuine engagement with the work. My colleagues had no idea I was anything other than what I appeared to be, a healthcare administrator starting fresh, after a corporate restructuring. I kept my lottery win completely private, maintaining the same routines and lifestyle I'd had before. Same modest lunch brought from home, same professional but unremarkable wardrobe, same 5-year-old Honda, in the parking lot. The only people who knew about my changed circumstances were Maya, my legal team, and the financial advisors managing my newly established trusts. This small circle of confidants provided both practical support and a reality check when the surreal nature of my situation became overwhelming. "How's it going, secret millionaire?" Maya asked over lunch on Friday, keeping her voice low despite the crowded restaurant. "Surreal," I admitted. "I spent yesterday morning in budget meetings, arguing for additional infection control training, resources that would cost the hospital $50,000. Then I spent the evening approving wire transfers in the millions for my philanthropic foundation." Maya smiled. "The Eleanor Mitchell Healthcare Access Initiative. Still can't believe. You named it something so practical. As opposed to what? The Planetary Vengeance Foundation, making Vanessa Mitchell Cooper's head explode." "Since 2023? I laughed. "I would donate to that foundation," Maya said with mock seriousness. "So when are you telling them? Your family, I mean." The question. I'd been circling for 2 weeks. "I'm thinking after I move into the new house. The closing is next Friday, and I can be settled within a week after that. Then maybe I'll host that family dinner I mentioned." "The big reveal," Maya mused. "Wish I could be there to see their faces." "Actually," I said, "I was hoping you would be there. Not for the reveal itself. That should probably be just family. But afterward, for support." "Moral support or physical backup? Because I've been working out, but Bradley looks like he plays squash or whatever rich people do for exercise." I laughed. "Moral support. Though I don't anticipate a scene. More likely an immediate pivot to how they always believed in me, followed by investment proposals and suggestions for how I should spend my money." "Classic," Maya agreed. "Speaking of spending money, how's the house planning going?" I pulled out my phone to show her the architect's preliminary sketches for the Craftsman renovation. Nothing ostentatious. Preservation of the original character with thoughtful updates to the kitchen, primary bathroom, and office space. The most significant addition was a detached studio in the backyard where I could develop my healthcare coordination initiative away from the main house. "It's perfect," Maya said, studying the plans. "Totally you. Practical, beautiful, but not flashy." "That's the goal," I agreed. "I want my life to reflect my values, not just my bank account. The money should enable meaningful choices, not define my identity." Maya looked up from the plans with unexpected seriousness. "You know, Ellie, most people wouldn't handle this situation the way you are. Sudden wealth usually changes people." "It's changing me too," I acknowledged, "just not in the ways people might expect. It's clarifying rather than transforming. Helping me see more clearly what's always mattered to me and what never really did." After lunch, I returned to Providence for afternoon meetings, continuing the compartmentalization that had defined these strange transitional weeks. Ordinary healthcare administrator by day, ultra-wealthy philanthropist by evening. The duality was unsustainable long-term, but served a purpose for now, allowing me to establish my professional identity independent of my financial circumstances. The weekend brought more concrete steps in my transformed life. Saturday morning. I met with the architect at the Craftsman House, walking through each room and discussing the renovation priorities. The previous owners had maintained the property's historic character while updating key systems. The roof was new, the electrical recently rewired, the foundation reinforced for earthquake safety. We can preserve most of the original features, the architect noted as we examined the built-in bookshelves and leaded glass windows in the living room. The craftsmanship is exceptional. That's what drew me to the house, I explained. The sense that it was built with care and meant to last. I want the renovations to honor that intention. We discussed timeline and budget, the former, more important than the latter now, though I saw no reason for excessive spending. Quality materials, skilled craftsmanship, thoughtful design, these were worth paying for. Luxury for its own sake was not. Later that afternoon, I met with Dr. Sanderson, former chief medical officer at Meridian and longtime mentor, to discuss the healthcare coordination initiative I was developing. She'd been surprised by my invitation to consult, but intrigued by the concept. We'd arranged to meet at a quiet cafe rather than my apartment, maintaining the appearance of normal financial circumstances until I was ready for wider disclosure. The concept is solid, she said after reviewing my preliminary plans. Bridging gaps between hospital discharge and community care is a persistent challenge, especially for vulnerable populations. But implementation is complex, particularly without institutional backing. That's where I'm hoping your expertise comes in, I said. I'm establishing a foundation to fund the initiative independently. We wouldn't be constrained by hospital profit motives or insurance limitations. Dr. Sanderson raised an eyebrow. A foundation? That's ambitious, Eleanor. Funding would be substantial for a program of this scope. The funding is secured, I assured her, not yet ready to reveal the full extent of my resources. I'm more concerned with building the right operational model and measuring outcomes effectively. She studied me with the perceptive gaze that had made her both an exceptional physician and administrator. Something's changed since Meridian. You've always been confident in your expertise, but this is different. You're talking about this initiative like it's already real, not just a concept. Because it is real, I said simply. Or it will be very soon. I've experienced some changes in my circumstances that make this possible now. She nodded slowly. Well, whatever those changes are, they seem positive. This initiative could genuinely transform care coordination if implemented properly. I'd be interested in consulting, particularly on the clinical integration aspects. We spent the next 2 hours outlining governance structures, staffing models, and evaluation frameworks. Dr. Sanderson's experience complemented my systems perspective, her clinical background filling gaps in my administrative approach. By the time we parted, we had a solid foundation for the initiative and plans to meet again the following week with other potential team members. Sunday morning, I woke to a text from Vanessa. Checking if you're coming to Mom's birthday lunch next month. Planning seating arrangements. I stared at the message, contemplating the irony. 3 weeks ago, I'd been explicitly uninvited from our father's birthday because of my failure energy. Now I was being included in advance planning for our mother's celebration. The only meaningful change had been securing employment that met their minimum standards for acceptability. Or so they thought. The actual change, my lottery win, remained private, known only to my small circle of confidants. How quickly would my place in the family hierarchy shift if they knew the full extent of my transformed circumstances? I texted back, "Yes, I'll be there," then added, I'd like to host a small family dinner at my new place before then. Friday after next? Vanessa's response came quickly. New place? Did you find a better apartment? The assumption was telling, that my housing options were necessarily limited to apartments, that better, in her lexicon, meant moving closer to her definition of acceptable housing rather than finding a place that truly suited my needs and preferences. Bought a house, I replied simply. Closing this Friday. A longer pause this time then. A house? In this market? With interest rates where they are? Again, the incredulity revealed her assumptions about my financial capacity and decision-making. I could almost see her mental calculations, trying to reconcile her perception of my limited resources with the reality of home ownership in an expensive market. Found something that works for me, I wrote back, deliberately vague. Dinner at 7? Nothing fancy, just family. Sure, she finally responded. We'll bring wine. Address? I sent the craftsman's address without elaboration, knowing the neighborhood would raise further questions. Not the most exclusive area in the city, but established and desirable, with historic homes on generous lots, well beyond what someone on a hospital administrator's salary could typically afford, particularly after a period of unemployment. The pieces of my new life were falling into place, requiring me to navigate increasingly complex explanations for the changes becoming visible to others. My family would be the most challenging audience for these revelations, their perceptions of my worth so intrinsically tied to economic metrics and status markers. Monday morning brought a meeting with the Eleanor Mitchell Healthcare Access Initiative's newly formed advisory board. Healthcare experts I respected, including Dr. Sanderson, who had agreed to help shape the foundation's mission and strategy. I'd been honest about the funding source, explaining the lottery win without unnecessary detail, focusing instead on the opportunity it created to address systemic healthcare gaps. The foundation's initial endowment is substantial, I explained, to the gathered experts. Enough to fund multiple coordination programs across different healthcare settings and maintain operations indefinitely if managed properly. And you want to focus specifically on transitions of care for vulnerable populations? Clarified Dr. Whitman, a public health researcher from the local university. Yes. Hospital discharge to home is particularly critical. Patients without resources often deteriorate after discharge because they can't navigate fragmented systems to access necessary follow-up care, medications, or support services. It's an ambitious but worthy focus, Dr. Sanderson commented, and not one that existing healthcare structures address effectively because the financial incentives aren't aligned. The meeting continued for 3 hours, the kind of deep, substantive discussion about healthcare improvement I'd always valued, but rarely had the freedom to pursue fully within corporate constraints. Now, with independent funding and decision-making authority, I could build programs based solely on patient needs and evidence-based practices rather than institutional politics or profit margins. By week's end, the initiative had a formal structure, mission statement, and initial programming focus. The advisory board would meet monthly to guide strategic development, with subcommittees addressing specific operational areas. Dr. Sanderson had agreed to serve as clinical director, bringing credibility and expertise that would help establish the foundation in healthcare circles. Friday brought the closing on the Craftsman House, a straightforward process given the cash purchase and minimal contingencies. By afternoon, I held the keys to my new home, the first major acquisition of my post-lottery life. Maya met me there after work, bearing champagne and takeout to celebrate. To new beginnings, she toasted as we sat on the empty living room floor, plastic cups of champagne and containers of Thai food spread before us. And to authentic choices, I added, clinking my cup against hers. We explored the empty house together, discussing furniture placement and paint colors. The renovations would take several months, but the house was perfectly livable in the meantime. I'd arranged for essential furniture to be delivered the following day, enough to host the family, Dinner the following Friday without revealing the full extent of my plans for the property. Are you nervous about telling them? Maya asked as we sat on the back porch, watching twilight settle over what would soon be my garden. I considered the question carefully. Not nervous exactly, more cautious. Their reaction will reveal a lot about our future relationship. If they immediately shift from condescension to calculated interest when they learn about the money, it confirms everything I already suspect about their conditional acceptance. And if they don't, if they're genuinely happy for you without trying to benefit from it, then I'll have misjudged them, I acknowledged, and that would be a good thing to discover. But based on that dinner at Vanessa's, I'm not optimistic. The week before the family dinner passed in a whirlwind of parallel activities. By day, I continued developing the infection control program at Providence, establishing protocols that would protect patients during their hospital stays. By evening, I alternated between setting up my new home and building the foundation that would protect those same patients after discharge. The contrast wasn't lost on me, working within the healthcare system by day while creating alternative supports to address its gaps by night. Both roles reflected my values and expertise, just operating at different scales and through different mechanisms. Both mattered. Furniture arrived for the essential rooms: living room, dining room, primary bedroom, and kitchen. Nothing extravagant, but all well-crafted and comfortable, selected for longevity rather than fashion. I arranged minimal decorations, a few pieces of local art I'd loved but previously couldn't afford, plants to bring life to the rooms, books that reflected my interests and values. The result was a home that felt authentically mine. Neither the constrained choices of limited resources nor the ostentatious display Vanessa might have created with similar funds. Comfortable, but not showy. Beautiful, but purposeful. Expressing who I was rather than what I owned. By Friday evening, I was ready. The dining table was set simply but elegantly. A meal catered by a local restaurant was warming in the kitchen, and wine selected by a consultant rather than by price point waited to be served. I dressed carefully, a silk blouse and tailored pants that happened to be new but weren't obviously expensive. Professional but relaxed, reflecting my evolving personal style rather than deliberate wealth signaling. Maya had helped with final preparations before departing, promising to return later for moral support. Text me when the revelation bomb has been dropped, she'd instructed. I'll give you an hour with them to process before I arrive. At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, centering myself in the knowledge that everything about this evening, from the house to the revelation to my approach, to family relationships going forward, represented authentic choices aligned with my values. Whatever happened next, I would remain true to the person I had always been, regardless of financial circumstances. I opened the door to find my family gathered on the porch, their expressions a study in barely concealed curiosity and judgment. My parents stood slightly behind Vanessa and Bradley, all 4 of them taking in the craftsman's restored exterior with visible surprise. Eleanor, my father greeted me, using the formal version of my name as he always did in uncertain social situations. This is unexpected. Welcome, I said simply, stepping back to allow them entrance. I'm glad you could all come. They filed into the foyer, their gazes sweeping the interior with the assessment of appraisers rather than the appreciation of guests. I watched as they registered details that contradicted their understanding of my financial reality. The original hardwood floors recently refinished, the period light fixtures, the glimpses of well-appointed rooms beyond the entryway. This is yours? My mother asked, her tone suggesting she assumed I must be house-sitting or had somehow misrepresented the situation. You purchased this home? Yes, I confirmed. The closing was last Friday. Bradley frowned slightly, the expression of someone recalculating figures that suddenly don't add up. This neighborhood has a high price point. These craftsman properties rarely come on the market. I was fortunate with timing, I said, offering no further explanation yet. Would you like a tour before dinner? Vanessa had been uncharacteristically quiet, her expression cycling through confusion, suspicion, and calculation. Now she stepped forward with determined brightness. Absolutely. I'm so curious how you've managed this. There must be an interesting story here. I led them through the main floor, living room with its original built-ins and leaded glass, dining room where the table was already set for our meal, kitchen with its blend of vintage charm and modern functionality, then upstairs to the bedrooms, including the primary suite with its sitting area overlooking the garden. Finally, back downstairs and through French doors to the backyard, where the detached studio stood ready for conversion into my foundation headquarters. Throughout the tour, they made appropriate appreciative comments, but the undercurrent of bewilderment was palpable. This house, with its character and craftsmanship, its generous proportions and desirable location, did not align with their understanding of my financial capacity. The cognitive dissonance was evident in their strained smiles and careful questions. It's lovely, my mother finally said as we returned to the living room. But Eleanor, how are you affording this? Even with the Providence position, this seems well beyond what someone in healthcare administration should be able to afford. I completed her thought. You're right. It would be, under normal circumstances. Have you taken on significant debt? My father asked with the automatic concern he'd always directed at my financial decisions. In this interest rate environment, an excessive mortgage could be problematic. No mortgage, I said simply. Cash purchase. The statement landed like a stone in still water. 4 pairs of eyes fixed on me with expressions ranging from disbelief to suspicion. Cash? Bradley repeated incredulously. That's not possible. These homes sell for well over $1 million in the current market. $1.7 million to be precise, I confirmed. Plus another $300,000 budgeted for renovations. Vanessa laughed, the sound brittle with forced casualness. Ellie, what's going on? Did you rob a bank? Discover a long-lost rich relative? This doesn't make sense. The moment had arrived, the revelation that would inevitably transform our family dynamic, for better or worse. I gestured toward the sofa. Maybe we should sit down. I have something to share with you. They arranged themselves on the living room furniture with the wariness of people who suspect a prank or scheme. My father leaned forward slightly, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. My mother perched on the edge of the sofa beside him, her social smile fixed firmly in place, despite the uncertainty in her eyes. Vanessa and Bradley exchanged a glance loaded with unspoken communication before turning their attention back to me. Well? Vanessa prompted. What's the big secret? I took a seat in the armchair opposite them, my posture relaxed but poised. 3 weeks ago, I won the lottery. $47 million to be exact. The silence that followed was absolute. 4 faces registered shock in distinct ways. My father's eyebrows shooting upward, my mother's hand flying to her collar, Bradley's mouth opening slightly, Vanessa's entire body freezing in place. That's not funny, Eleanor, my mother finally said, her voice strained. It's not a joke, I replied calmly. I have a ticket purchased the day after I was uninvited from Dad's birthday celebration. The winning numbers were drawn the following morning. I've since claimed the prize, established appropriate financial structures, and begun implementing plans for both personal and philanthropic use of the funds. $47 million, Bradley repeated, financial calculations visibly processing behind his eyes. After taxes, that's approximately $28 million, give or take, I confirmed. Yes, I've accounted for tax implications in my financial planning. Why didn't you tell us immediately? My father asked, finding his voice at last. This is extraordinary news, Eleanor. Family should share in such momentous events. The irony of his statement, given my explicit exclusion from his birthday celebration just weeks earlier, was breathtaking. I kept my expression neutral. I needed time, I explained, to process the change myself, to establish proper legal and financial structures, and to consider what this means for my life going forward. Of course you did, Vanessa interjected, her initial shock now transforming into something more calculated. It's a lot to take in. We completely understand, don't we? She looked pointedly at our parents, who nodded with sudden enthusiasm. Absolutely, my mother agreed quickly. Such a blessing, Eleanor. We're so happy for you. The pivot was exactly as I'd anticipated, from condescension to enthusiasm, from judgment to support, from exclusion to embrace. Not because I had changed as a person, but because my economic status now met their criteria for value. Thank you, I said simply. Bradley cleared his throat. I have several clients in similar situations. Sudden wealth requires specialized management. I'd be happy to introduce you to our high net worth team at the firm. That's very kind, I replied. But I've already established a comprehensive financial team. The structures are in place. He blinked, clearly unprepared for the possibility that I might not need or want his financial guidance. Well, if you'd like a second opinion at any point. I'll keep that in mind, I assured him. The same response I'd given at their dinner when he'd offered unsolicited financial advice based on his assumption of my limited resources. Vanessa leaned forward, her expression now animated with excitement. This is just amazing, Ellie. God, I can't believe you kept this secret for 3 weeks. No wonder you could buy this gorgeous house. What else are you planning? A vacation property? New car? I've established a healthcare foundation, I said, redirecting the conversation from consumption to purpose. The Eleanor Mitchell Healthcare Access Initiative. We'll focus on improving care coordination for vulnerable populations, particularly during transitions from hospital to home. My mother's forehead creased slightly, her enthusiasm dimming at this unexpected direction. That's very noble, dear. But surely you'll also enjoy some of this blessing personally? Perhaps a more upscale neighborhood than this? Or investments in some of Bradley's funds? Her question revealed everything about her values and expectations. That appropriate wealth use meant status displays and family financial entanglements rather than community impact or personal meaning. This neighborhood suits me perfectly, I replied. And yes, I've made substantial investments in the foundation, in a diversified portfolio managed by my financial team, and in this home, which represents exactly what I want. Not more, not less. My father studied me with newfound attention, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. You seem to have thought this through quite thoroughly, Eleanor. I have, I confirmed. The money has changed my circumstances, not my character or values. I'm still the same person I was before the lottery, just with more resources to pursue what's always mattered to me. The statement hung in the air, between us, its implications rippling through the carefully constructed family narrative. I had always been this person, thoughtful, purposeful, values-driven. The economic limitations that had previously allowed them to dismiss my choices as necessity rather than principle were now removed, revealing the authentic preferences that had always guided me. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly before she recovered. Well, this calls for celebration. Bradley, open that wine you brought. A toast to Ellie's incredible good fortune. She turned to me with bright eyes. And to think, this happened right after Dad's birthday. What perfect timing. The reference to the birthday I'd been uninvited from, delivered without a hint of acknowledgement or apology, crystallized everything about our family dynamic in a single moment. The selective memory, the rewriting of uncomfortable realities, the transactional nature of inclusion based on perceived value. Yes, I agreed, my voice steady. Perfect timing indeed. To Eleanor's amazing good fortune. My family raised their glasses in a toast that felt more performative than genuine. The wine Bradley had brought, previously presented as a generous offering, now seemed inadequate against the backdrop of my revealed wealth. The shift in their behavior was immediate and transparent. My mother, who had barely acknowledged my professional accomplishments at Providence, now leaned forward with exaggerated interest. "Tell us more about this foundation you've established. Eleanor, it sounds fascinating." Her tone carried the same forced enthusiasm she'd used when Vanessa's children performed in elementary school plays, polite interest masking fundamental disengagement with something she considered unimportant. "The foundation addresses gaps in healthcare coordination," I explained, keeping my voice steady and professional. "When vulnerable patients leave hospitals, they often struggle to navigate fragmented follow-up care, leading to poor outcomes and preventable readmissions. We're developing programs to bridge those transitions." Bradley nodded with the expression of someone evaluating a business proposal rather than a social mission. "Interesting market position. Healthcare navigation is an emerging sector with significant growth potential." "It's not about market position," I clarified. "It's about patient impact, improving health outcomes for people who fall through the cracks in our current system." Of course," he amended quickly. "But impact and growth aren't mutually exclusive. With proper scaling, you could develop a model that attracts significant institutional investment." The comment revealed everything about Bradley's worldview, that even healthcare for vulnerable populations should be viewed through a lens of profit potential and investment returns. That value was measured in financial metrics rather than human outcomes. "The foundation is structured as a nonprofit," I said, "with sufficient endowment to operate independently without prioritizing growth or investment returns over mission." My father frowned slightly. "Nonprofits still benefit from sound business principles, Eleanor. Perhaps Bradley could review your operational model with his financial expertise." "I've assembled an advisory board of healthcare experts," I interjected gently but firmly, "including Dr. Sanderson, the former CMO of Meridian, and researchers from 3 major universities. The governance structure is solid." The subtle boundary setting, establishing that I didn't need Bradley's expertise or my father's business guidance, landed awkwardly in the conversation. A brief silence followed, my family recalibrating to this unfamiliar dynamic, where I declined their input instead of seeking their approval. Vanessa recovered first, pivoting smoothly to a more accessible topic. "The house is just lovely, Ellie. Those built-ins in the living room are spectacular. Though I'm surprised you chose this neighborhood rather than Lakeside Heights or River. Point. The properties there have much better appreciation potential." "I wasn't looking for investment appreciation," I explained. "I wanted a home that felt right for me. Historically significant, walkable neighborhood, strong sense of community. This craftsman ticked all those boxes." "Still," my mother chimed in, "with your resources now, you could have properties in multiple locations, a city residence, perhaps a lake house for weekends. The Milton family just purchased the most exquisite cottage on Lake Windermere." There it was, the assumption that wealth should automatically translate to multiple properties, to status acquisitions that aligned with their social circle's expectations, that my choices should suddenly mirror theirs, now that financial constraints were removed. "I'm focusing on this home for now," I said. "The renovation will take several months, and I want to be hands-on with the process." My father cleared his throat. "Speaking of processes, have you engaged proper wealth management? These matters can be complex, especially with lottery winnings. Statistics show that many winners mismanage their funds without appropriate guidance." "I've established comprehensive structures," I assured him. "Trusts, investment portfolios, tax planning. Everything has been addressed with a team of specialists." "But family guidance is still valuable," he persisted. "People who know you, who have your best interests at heart. Bradley's firm specializes in newly acquired wealth." The implication was clear, that I couldn't possibly navigate these waters without their involvement. that family connections should automatically translate to financial entanglements. That my independent decision-making was somehow insufficient despite evidence to the contrary. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm comfortable with the team I've assembled. They've been extremely thorough." An awkward silence descended, the conversation temporarily stalled by my refusal to engage with their assumptions about how my wealth should be managed. I rose from my seat. "Dinner should be ready. Shall we move to the dining room?" The meal provided temporary structure to an increasingly strained interaction. As we settled around the table, the physical act of passing dishes and discussing the food created a semblance of normalcy. But beneath the surface, fundamental recalibrations were occurring. My family processing my changed status and my unexpected boundaries around it. "So," Vanessa ventured as we began eating, "will you be continuing at Providence now that you don't need to work?" The slight hesitation revealed her struggle to reconcile my employment with my newfound wealth. "Yes," I confirmed. "The work is meaningful and aligns with my values. The infection control program benefits vulnerable patients, complementing what the foundation will do in post-discharge coordination. But surely with $47 million you could pursue more." "Elevated interests?" my mother suggested. "Travel, perhaps, or arts patronage. The symphony is always seeking board members with philanthropic capacity." The phrase "elevated interests" landed with particular weight, the implication that healthcare administration was somehow lesser, something done from necessity rather than choice, that my professional focus on protecting vulnerable patients was a compromise rather than a calling. "Healthcare is my elevated interest," I replied simply. "It always has been. The lottery win doesn't change that. It just expands what I can accomplish in the field." Bradley set down his fork with the precision of someone about to make an important point. While admirable, that perspective might limit your social integration into certain circles. High-net-worth individuals tend to engage in specific philanthropic arenas: arts, education, global initiatives. Healthcare coordination is niche. The statement crystallized everything about my family's value system. That philanthropy should be selected for social positioning rather than authentic passion. That certain circles should dictate my choices rather than my own expertise and values. "I'm not particularly concerned with social integration into high-net-worth circles," I said, my tone neutral but firm. "I'm focused on creating meaningful impact in an area I understand deeply." My mother exchanged a glance with Vanessa, a silent communication passing between them. "We just want you to benefit fully from this blessing, Eleanor, to take advantage of all it offers. Access to new experiences, new relationships, new opportunities." "I am benefiting fully," I assured her, "by pursuing precisely what matters most to me without financial constraints. That's the true gift of this situation, the freedom to align my resources with my values." The concept seemed to puzzle them, that I viewed wealth primarily as a means to express existing values rather than as a ticket to a different social stratum. That my core identity remained unchanged despite my transformed economic status. "Well, we're just thrilled for you," Vanessa declared, her voice carrying the forced brightness she used when redirecting uncomfortable conversations. "And of course, we're here to help however you need. Family supports family, after all." The irony of that statement, coming just weeks after my explicit exclusion from our father's birthday celebration, hung in the air between us. The conditional nature of their support had never been more transparent, shifting with my perceived economic value rather than reflecting genuine connection. "Thank you," I said simply, neither accepting nor rejecting the offer. The doorbell rang, providing a welcome interruption to the increasingly strained conversation. "That would be Maya," I explained, rising from the table. I invited her to join us for dessert. I welcomed Maya with a quick hug, whispering, "Perfect timing," before leading her to the dining room. Her presence shifted the dynamic immediately, introducing someone who had valued me consistently before and after the lottery win, whose relationship with me wasn't defined by economic metrics or family hierarchy. "Maya, you remember my parents, and my sister Vanessa, and her husband Bradley." Maya greeted everyone with warm politeness that revealed nothing of the conversations we'd had about my family dynamics. "Your home is beautiful, Ellie," she said, taking the seat I'd indicated. "Those original windows in the living room are spectacular." "Maya was with me when I bought the lottery ticket," I explained to my family. "Her idea, actually." "Then, we all owe you a debt of gratitude," my father said to Maya with newfound warmth. "What extraordinary foresight." Maya smiled. "Pure luck." We stopped for coffee and I insisted on buying tickets for career transition karma. Never imagined it would actually work. "Career transition," Vanessa repeated, her tone suggesting she was filing this information away. "So, you knew about Eleanor's situation with Meridian?" "Of course," Maya replied easily. "We've been friends for 15 years. We support each other through everything." The simple statement carried subtle weight, highlighting the consistency of our friendship through my divorce, career challenges, and financial fluctuations. A relationship based on genuine connection rather than conditional acceptance. "How lovely," my mother commented, her social smile firmly in place. "Eleanor is fortunate to have such supportive friends." "I'm the fortunate one," Maya countered. "Ellie has been there for me through 2 career changes, a messy breakup, and my mother's health crisis last year. Some people show up no matter what. That's who you want in your corner." The gentle rebuke wasn't lost on my family, though they showed no outward acknowledgement of it. Instead, my father steered the conversation toward safer territory: Maya's current position at a risk management firm, the housing market in our city, the weather forecast for the coming week. As I served dessert, a simple but elegant tart from a local bakery, I observed the shifting dynamics around my table. My family, performing their roles with practiced precision, now adjusted to include enthusiasm for my lottery win. Maya providing the grounding presence of authentic connection. And myself, navigating boundaries that had never before been necessary when I'd occupied the lowest rung in the family hierarchy. "Eleanor mentioned you're planning renovations," Bradley said as he finished his dessert. "I know an excellent contractor who specializes in high-end properties. He did our wine cellar and media room. I'd be happy to connect you." "Thank you, but I've already engaged an architect and contractor," I replied. We're focusing on preserving the craftsman character while updating key spaces. "Our contractor has experience with historical properties," Vanessa interjected. "He could at least provide a consultation. Maybe suggest luxury upgrades you haven't considered." "The plans are finalized," I said firmly. "The renovation reflects exactly what I want. Nothing more, nothing less." My mother sighed slightly. "You've always been so practical, Eleanor, even as a child. But with these resources, you could create something truly exceptional. A showcase home." "I don't want a showcase home," I replied simply. "I want a space that supports my life and work, that reflects my values rather than impressing others." The concept seemed genuinely foreign to them, that I might have the means for ostentation but deliberately choose otherwise. That my preferences weren't just compromises based on limited resources, but authentic expressions of my character. "Well, to each their own," my father said with the dismissive tone he used when disagreeing but unwilling to argue further. "Though properties in this area tend to appreciate better with certain premium features. Something to consider from an investment perspective." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, the same response I'd given to multiple suggestions throughout the evening. A polite acknowledgement that neither committed to their input nor rejected it outright. As the evening drew to a close, the conversation turned to future plans, both mine and theirs. Vanessa mentioned their upcoming trip to the Maldives, a destination selected after careful research into where the truly discerning travelers are going this season. My mother detailed renovations planned for their retirement community villa, emphasizing the exclusive nature of the development. "And what about you, Eleanor?" my father asked, his tone suggesting genuine curiosity for perhaps the first time that evening. "Beyond the foundation and this house, what are your plans now?" The question was revealing, focused on what I would do with wealth rather than who I would be or what values would guide me. As if the lottery win necessarily meant a fundamental reimagining of my life's direction rather than an expansion of existing priorities. "I'll continue building the infection control program at Providence," I said. "Develop the Foundation's first coordination initiatives. Complete the house renovations. Essentially the same purposes that have always driven me, just with fewer resource constraints." My father nodded slowly, perhaps beginning to understand that the consistency in my choices reflected deliberate values rather than limited options. "And what about personal matters? Family considerations?" The question carried multiple layers. Was I considering marriage now that my economic status made me more eligible? Planning for children with my newfound security? Establishing inheritance structures for future generations? "My focus is on building meaningful impact professionally and creating a life aligned with my values personally," I replied. "Those have always been my priorities and remain so." "But surely your circumstances open new possibilities," my mother pressed. "Relationships with different sorts of people than might have been available previously." The implication was both clear and disturbing, that my romantic prospects would be enhanced by wealth, that better partners would now find me acceptable, that relationships themselves were transactions influenced by economic status. "I'm not interested in relationships with people who would value me differently based on my bank account," I said, more directly than I'd intended, whether professionally or personally. The statement landed with unmistakable implications for our family dynamic. A brief, uncomfortable silence followed. Maya glanced at me with subtle support before checking her watch. "I should probably head out. Early meeting tomorrow." Her movement provided natural closure to the evening. My family began gathering their things, making appreciative comments about the meal and the house with careful politeness that masked the unresolved tensions beneath. At the door, Vanessa embraced me with unexpected warmth. "This has been enlightening, Ellie. We should get together more often now that you're settled in your new place. Perhaps you could join us at the lake house next weekend? The boys would love to see their aunt." The invitation, to a family property I'd been subtly excluded from in recent years, highlighted the transformation in my perceived value. Now, that I had means comparable to hers, I was suddenly welcome in spaces previously reserved for the successful branches of the family. "Thank you, but I have foundation meetings next weekend," I replied. "Another time, perhaps." Of course, you're busy with your healthcare project." Her slight hesitation revealed her continued bewilderment that I would prioritize a public health initiative over social engagements with her family. "But we should definitely schedule something soon. Bradley's firm is hosting a client appreciation event at the Yacht Club next month. Very exclusive. You might make valuable connections." Again, the assumption that I would naturally want access to their social circles now that my economic status made such access possible. That I would prioritize valuable connections over meaningful work or authentic relationships. "I'll check my calendar," I said noncommittally. My parents departed with similar attempts at relationship recalibration. My father suggesting a meeting with his financial advisors just to get a second opinion on your structures. my mother proposing lunch at her country club, to discuss your philanthropic strategy more thoroughly. Each offer represented their effort to establish new terms of engagement based on my changed economic status. Each assumed that wealth would naturally shift my priorities to align with theirs. Each failed to recognize that the consistency in my values before and after the lottery win reflected authentic character rather than circumstantial limitation. After they departed, Maya helped me clear the dining table, waiting until we were alone in the kitchen before speaking freely. "Well, that was something," she observed, loading plates into the dishwasher. The speed of that pivot from failure, energy to beloved family member was actually impressive, like watching Olympic-level mental gymnastics. I smiled despite myself. They're adjusting to a new reality where I don't fit neatly into the family hierarchy anymore. It's disorienting for everyone. "Including you?" Maya asked perceptively. I considered the question carefully. It's clarifying more than disorienting. Seeing so transparently how their acceptance shifts with my economic status confirms what I've always suspected about our relationship. There's a certain freedom in that clarity. Freedom to establish new boundaries, Maya suggested. Or to invest more in relationships based on genuine connection rather than conditional acceptance. Exactly. I leaned against the counter, surveying my new kitchen, a space that represented authentic choice rather than compromise or status-seeking. I don't need to cut them off completely, but I can be selective about engagement, clear about boundaries, intentional about what I share and what I don't. Maya nodded. Healthy distance without complete estrangement. Precisely. And meanwhile, focusing energy on relationships and work that align with my values. Building something meaningful with these unexpected resources. After Maya left, I walked slowly through my new home, experiencing the quiet rooms with fresh appreciation. The craftsman's solid construction and thoughtful details reflected precisely what I valued. Quality without ostentation, beauty with purpose, history honored through preservation rather than erasure. The evening had confirmed everything I'd been processing since the lottery win. My family's conditional acceptance, the transactional nature of their understanding of relationships, the narrow metrics by which they measured worth and success. But it had also confirmed my capacity to navigate this transformed landscape without being transformed myself, to maintain core values while expanding impact, to establish boundaries that protected my authentic identity from others' expectations about how wealth should change me. I settled on the window seat in what would become my home office, looking out at the garden now silvered with moonlight. Tomorrow I would return to Providence Hospital, continuing to build infection control systems that protected vulnerable patients. Next week, I would meet with the Foundation's advisory board to refine our first coordination initiative. The following month, I would begin more extensive house renovations, creating spaces that supported both my life and work. None of these plans had fundamentally changed with the lottery win. They had simply expanded in scope and possibility. My priorities remained consistent, my values intact, my identity anchored in purpose rather than economics. The true win wasn't the $47 million. It was the clarity this unexpected wealth had provided about what truly mattered: authentic connection, meaningful impact, values-aligned choices. It was the freedom to pursue these priorities without financial constraint, but also without being defined by material abundance. As I prepared for bed in my new home, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not primarily for the money itself, but for the opportunity it created to live with complete integrity, to align my external circumstances with my internal values, to build a life and legacy defined by purpose rather than accumulation. My family might never fully understand or appreciate these choices. They might continue measuring success by status markers and social positioning rather than impact and authenticity. They might persist in conditional acceptance based on perceived value rather than genuine connection. But their understanding was no longer necessary for my peace or progress. Their approval was no longer a metric by which I measured my worth. Their expectations no longer defined my possibilities. I was, quite simply, free, not because of wealth, but because of clarity. Free to build a life that reflected my truest self, to create impact that expressed my deepest values, to nurture relationships based on authentic connection rather than conditional acceptance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to align actions with values. But tonight, I slept peacefully in my Craftsman home, grateful for unexpected blessings that went far beyond monetary measurement. Clarity, purpose, and the courage to live authentically regardless of external judgment or expectation. 3. Months after revealing my lottery win to my family, I stood in the garden studio of my Craftsman home, now transformed into the headquarters of the Eleanor Mitchell Healthcare Access Initiative. The space combined functionality with thoughtful design, large windows providing natural light, comfortable seating areas for team discussions, and efficient workstations for our growing staff. Dr. Sanderson reviewed data projected on the wall. Screen, our pilot program's first-month metrics from Providence Hospital. These early results are promising, Eleanor. 30-day readmission rates for high-risk patients enrolled in our coordination program are already showing a 15% reduction compared to control groups. I nodded, studying the graphs with measured satisfaction. The medication reconciliation component seems particularly effective. Preventing adverse drug events during the transition from hospital to home is making a significant difference. And the Transportation Assistance Program has nearly eliminated missed follow-up appointments, added Marisa Chen, our operations director recruited from a national healthcare nonprofit. Patients who previously couldn't access post-discharge care due to transportation barriers are now consistently making those critical appointments. The foundation had moved from concept to implementation with remarkable efficiency, powered by adequate funding and a team of dedicated healthcare experts who shared my vision. What had once been a side project constrained by corporate priorities and limited resources was now a fully operational program addressing precisely the gaps I'd identified throughout my career. We should consider expanding the pilot to Lakeside Medical Center next quarter, I suggested. Their patient demographics include more rural populations who face different coordination challenges. It would test our model's adaptability. As the team discussed expansion strategies, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Don't forget Mom's birthday lunch Saturday, country club at noon. Dress code is summer chic, whatever that means. Bradley says to remind you about that. Investment opportunity, he mentioned. Time-sensitive, apparently. The message represented everything that had evolved in our family dynamic since the lottery revelation. The casual inclusion in events I'd previously been excluded from. The subtle, financial entanglements disguised as helpful reminders. The assumption that I would naturally prioritize their social engagements now that I was deemed worthy of inclusion. I texted back a simple confirmation about attending the lunch, ignoring the reference to Bradley's investment opportunity, the third, time-sensitive exclusive proposal he'd mentioned in recent weeks. Each presented with the expectation that family connections would automatically override due diligence or alignment with my established investment criteria. Everything okay? Dr. Sanderson asked as I returned my attention to the meeting. Fine, I assured her. Just family matters. Where were we? Discussing potential partnerships with home health agencies to extend coordination support beyond the initial 30-day post-discharge period. We continued planning the Foundation's next phase, identifying opportunities to deepen impact while maintaining programmatic focus. The work was exactly what I'd always wanted to do, addressing systemic healthcare gaps, creating navigation pathways for vulnerable patients, measuring outcomes to refine approaches continuously. The lottery win hadn't changed my professional purpose. It had simply removed the institutional constraints that had previously limited what I could accomplish. Working simultaneously at Providence Hospital and the Foundation, allowed me to address healthcare challenges from both within and outside the system, creating complementary approaches to patient protection and support. After the meeting concluded, I walked through my garden to the main house, now comfortably settled after modest but thoughtful renovations. Unlike Vanessa's showcase home with its media room and wine cellar, my craftsman reflected precisely what I valued: natural materials, functional spaces for both work and relaxation, historical character preserved rather than erased by modernization. Maya arrived for our weekly dinner, bearing a bottle of wine and her characteristic straightforward energy. "How's the healthcare revolution going?" "Steadily advancing," I replied with a smile. "Early data is encouraging. We're already seeing fewer readmissions and better medication adherence among program participants. Amazing what adequate resources and the right expertise can accomplish," she observed, following me to the kitchen where dinner was already in progress. A simple but high-quality meal prepared by a local chef service. Another thoughtful luxury enabled by my changed circumstances, but aligned with my values, supporting local businesses while creating time for meaningful work rather than household tasks. "And how are things on the family front?" Maya asked, as we settled at the kitchen island with glasses of wine. "Has Vanessa invited you to join their private island vacation yet, or is that privilege still pending?" I laughed despite myself. Not quite, though I have been deemed worthy of inclusion in Mom's birthday lunch this weekend, complete with dress code specifications and a reminder about Bradley's latest exclusive investment opportunity. Let me guess, another startup founded by his squash partner or college roommate. Close, a real estate development his firm is underwriting. Apparently, initial units are being offered to friends and family before public listing. A rare opportunity that I'd be foolish to miss. I mimicked Bradley's precise, authoritative tone with reasonable accuracy. Maya rolled her eyes. The transparency would be amusing if it weren't so predictable. 3 months ago, you had failure. Energy that might contaminate family gatherings. Now you're family who deserves exclusive opportunities. To be fair, they're trying to adapt to a new reality. The adjustment hasn't been easy for any of us. I arranged our dinner on plates, local sea bass with seasonal vegetables, beautifully prepared but not ostentatious. Their entire understanding of our family dynamic was built on a hierarchy where I occupied the lowest position. That structure has been fundamentally disrupted, and they're still finding their footing. "Very generous interpretation," Maya noted, taking her plate to the dining room table. "Though I notice you didn't mention whether you're considering Bradley's exclusive investment opportunity." "I am not," I confirmed with a smile. "My financial team reviewed the prospectus. The development is over-leveraged, the location questionable, and the projected returns highly optimistic. Not something that meets my investment criteria." "Will you tell them that?" I considered the question carefully. "I'll thank Bradley for thinking of me, but explain that it doesn't align with my current investment strategy. No need to critique the opportunity itself." "Always the diplomat," Maya observed. "How very Eleanor Mitchell of you." We enjoyed dinner with comfortable conversation, discussing everything from Maya's recent promotion to the healthcare policy changes affecting our coordination programs. The evening represented exactly what I valued in relationships: authentic connection, mutual respect, shared history that transcended economic circumstances. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.